debt is 100% of GDP currently, isn't it, Tom? So we'll be discussing that with an economist later on in the show.
But talking of problems for the government, the Prime Minister faces potentially losing 3 previously safe Tory seats next week with a string of tense by-elections.
Yes, losses in the constituencies would exacerbate concerns over Sunak's leadership ahead of the general election.
Yes, well, let's have a look at what is actually going on with Professor Matt Goodwin, Professor in Politics and International Relations, of course. Matt, thanks so much for joining us this morning. This is almost spectacular expectations management from the Conservative Party. Seats that have majorities in 2 cases of above 20,000 votes, and everyone expects they'll lose them. Is that what you think?
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely spot on, Tom. The game with by-elections is always expectation management. And with these particular contests, I think we're looking at a summer of discontent for Rishi Sunak. Let's just step back from those by-elections a minute, look at the national polling story. I'm afraid to say for number 10, the trend is now turning against them after a bit of a bounce earlier this year for Rishi Sunak. Now Labour's lead is extending again up to around 20 points. So if viewers want a metric to keep in mind, to win a majority at the next general election, Labour will need to be about 12.5 points ahead in the national polls. They're currently averaging about 18, 19 points ahead of the Conservatives. So these by-elections are likely to see some enormous swings away from the Conservatives. One question, Tom, to keep in mind, though, is earlier by-elections this year, Labour actually underperformed the national polls. They still did very well, but they underperformed the national polls. If actually they now perform in line with these national polls, then this should really be flashing the red warning sign in number 10. So I'm going to be watching how is Labour doing relative to that national story.
When we look at the polling in detail, it does show that at least when it comes to who makes the best Prime Minister, it does seem that Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are, well, they're equal, are they not? Is there any hope that Rishi Sunak could turn it around? What could he do, in your view, that might bring back the general British public to his side?
Yeah, I mean, they are certainly broadly similar, Emily, but they're also both quite unpopular figures. I mean, we have a somewhat unique position at the moment in British politics, and everybody is basically unpopular. Millions of people out there watching this show will be feeling utterly fed up and disillusioned with British politics. And I think essentially what Sunak's got a number of problems, one of which is he's a little bit more popular than a very unpopular party. The Conservative brand is basically toxic. I was sat in focus groups in the Red Wall just 2 weeks ago. The Conservative Party has an enormous image problem, which I don't really need to explain beyond that. I think secondly, Sunak doesn't really have a lead on any of the major issues facing voters today, on the economy, on National Health Service, on immigration. On all of these big seismic issues, Labour is either ahead by a few points or is comfortably ahead, as with the NHS, by 20, 25 points. Now, when you don't have ownership over any of these big issues in British politics, you're not going to win the next election, right? You're just simply not going to win the next election. I think back previously, Boris Johnson, he was leagues ahead on Brexit. That was his path to a majority. Tony Blair, leagues ahead on education and public services. That was his path to victory. Margaret Thatcher, leagues ahead on inflation and industrial disputes. That was her path to victory. Sunak today doesn't have any big leads on that issue, on these issues. So that's another massive problem. And just lastly, Emily, look at history. No party in the entire history of British politics has emerged as the largest political party of 5 elections in a row. So already history is working against the Conservatives, irrespective of all of those problems I mentioned, irrespective of inflation, irrespective of record legal and illegal migration, irrespective of the fact that he's only holding half of Boris Johnson's 2019 voters, and irrespective of the fact that the Conservatives no longer really know who they are or what they believe. So look, I'm going to give Rishi Sunak a 5% chance of winning the next general election, but Labour are odds on for a reason. These fundamentals do not favour the Conservatives.
No, it'll be absolutely fascinating to see how these by-elections play out this time next week. Well, no doubt we'll be dissecting whatever's happened on this very programme. But for now, Professor Matthew Goodwin, thank you so much for joining us here on Britain's News.